Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about writing a good introduction paragraph for your essay, and I'm going to use examples that should be helpful to you in your for your transcendentalism response essay. Okay, please don't use these examples in your essay, but at least hopefully it'll help give you an idea of what we're looking for here. First, in your introduction, you need to start with a hook. You always start your intro with a hook, something that grabs your reader's attention and makes them interested in what you're talking about. You can do this in a number of ways. I'm going to show you a couple different examples of what I think good hooks are. The first one being a question. You could use a quote. You can tell a very, very short anecdote or story. And then you can also start with a metaphor or simile. I'm going to go over each one of these right now. So, in terms of a hook, you could start with a question. Your very first line of your essay could be a question. This can be a really effective way to hook your reader, but it often is not. So you have to be really careful about what kinds of questions you ask. You want to avoid dumb questions that everybody already knows the answer to. So here are some bad examples of questions, okay? Do you know that nature can make people happy? Yeah, I think I'm pretty aware of that, okay? Did you know that people should like themselves? Yeah, I think that's generally accepted that we should like ourselves. Or, have you ever felt sad? No, I've never felt sad. I'm a robot. Like, of course, everybody's felt sad. So those are all dumb questions. Everybody knows the answer to them. Also, if you notice, the first two, actually all three of them, are yes or no questions. Do you know that blank? Yes, I know. Did you know that blank? Yes, I know. Have you ever felt sad? Yes. Those are all yes or no questions, and so it really is just a quick response. Some better examples of how to hook your reader with a question would be, do Christians have to sacrifice the pursuit of happiness in pursuit of righteousness? Now, granted, that's a yes or a no question, but it's a little bit more loaded. And in order for me to respond to that question as a reader, I'd have to really sit there and think, right? In order to be a righteous person, do you have to sacrifice happiness? I would say the answer is no, but there's a lot of kind of wiggle room in there. And well, what if this? What if that? And so that is a better question because it's going to make your reader think a little bit. Here's another one. When was the last time you immersed yourself in nature to find peace? The reason why I like that question is because A, it's not a yes or a no question, and B, it makes the reader really think back to a time, or that's the goal of it, right? Is to make them actually think back to a time. Again, the goal of asking a question as your hook is to make the reader think. So that's what you want to do and avoid dumb questions. Another way you can hook your reader is through the use of a quote. Hopefully it's a really good one. Make sure that you choose one that applies to the focus of your paper. So if your focus is really about kind of doing things on your own or individuality within transcendentalism, you could use Ralph Waldo Emerson, and this comes from Self-Reliance, by the way. God will not have his work made manifest by cowards. Okay, I like that one because it also mentions God, and the topic of your essay has to do with a Christian response to transcendentalism. Next one, if you're talking about government, if the focus of your paper is mostly about government, Edward R. Murrow said, "A nation of sheep will beget a government of wolves." Okay, or if you're going to write mostly about nature, John Muir said, "In every walk with nature, one receives far more than he seeks." Okay, so you can introduce your essay with a quote. That's perfectly fine. So we got question, quote. You can also start with a very, very brief anecdote or story. The goal of telling an anecdote, which by the way should only be about 3 or 4 sentences, is to paint a picture for your reader. Tell a story that connects to your argument. Help the reader kind of visualize what you're talking about. So if you're talking about mostly individualism, I might describe an experience I had when trying to fit in. Or if I'm mostly talking about nature, I might describe a time when I felt at peace in nature. Or maybe I tell an interesting statistic or fact that ties into my paper. Again, the goal is to help them visualize it. So when you give statistics, sometimes you can visualize kind of pie charts and such. A recent Gallup shows that only 28% of Americans have a positive overall view of the U.S. federal government, while 55% hold an unfavorable opinion. Okay, that tells a story right there. All right. Here's an example. This would be my own personal example, and this would be one for nature. There's something about Yosemite Valley that makes it my favorite place in California, maybe the world. I recently ascended to the top of Half Dome, and although I wasn't completely alone, the fresh air and beautiful sweeping views made everything in the world seem simple for a few moments. It was breathtaking, although perhaps part of that was that I was literally out of breath from the ascend. Okay, notice I didn't spend a whole page telling a story, but I did give you kind of I placed you in my situation of hiking up Half Dome and feeling at peace and my breath being taken away and all of that. Okay, so you could do a question, you can do a quote, you can do an anecdote. You can also start with a metaphor or simile. This one's my personal favorite. Make sure that if you do start with a metaphor or simile, that it is an original one. It can't be the boring old life is like a box of chocolates. Like, it can't be one that you can just real quick Google and say, oh, metaphors about nature, and then pull it off the internet. This should be one that you thought of. It should be original. For example, as a Christian, I read transcendentalist works the same way that a dog salivates for chocolate. It looks so good and tantalizing, but many of the ideas are poisonous to my faith. So I made a comparison between how I read transcendental works to a dog salivating for chocolate, which of course chocolate is not good for dogs, and so that's saying that the transcendentalist works are not good for me as a Christian. After the hook, you want to make sure that you start to transition, because the hook is usually broadly talking about your general area of focus. And then you're going to want to start to narrow down, because ultimately you're trying to get to your thesis, which is going to be extremely narrow, very specific, and should include your clear stance. After the hook, don't start giving examples that support your thesis. That should be saved for your body paragraphs. However, you may want to introduce background information related to your topic. Okay, this also would be a good spot for statistics if you didn't start with one. Okay, so again, we've got the hook, which is broadly talking about your topic. Now we're going to start to transition and narrow down into your thesis. A little bit about your thesis. First of all, it should be only one sentence. Okay, your thesis should include all parts of the prompt: Christianity and transcendentalism, and two specific topics within that. It should encompass all key parts of your outline without simply listing your ideas. Okay, again, look for umbrella terms that encompass more broadly what your focus is. You want to try and make it sound argumentative, meaning acknowledging the other side. Okay, so maybe you think that transcendental works are perfectly fine and they totally align with Christianity. Some people disagree, so acknowledge that there's disagreement there. Your thesis should also go at the very end of your introductory paragraph. Please do not put your thesis as your first sentence. It should go at the end of your intro paragraph. So yes, your thesis comes at the beginning of the essay, but not at the very beginning, at the end of your intro. Okay. As a reminder, let's talk about umbrella terms. So let's say my argument is Christianity does not agree with transcendental ideas. Okay. I'm going to say that transcendentalists say that people are good, so morality is relative, whereas Christians say people are sinful, so we need God's law. I don't want to list all four of these ideas in my thesis, but all four of those ideas need to be covered. So I need to come up with shorter phrases that cover multiple ideas. Okay? So the first two, people are good, morality is relative, versus people are sinful, so we need God's law. Both of those have to do with the goodness or depravity of man. Okay? So that would be the phrase that I'd use. Second two, the transcendentalists say we don't need laws or government, whereas Christians would say God has called us to submit to authority. So both of those, what do they have in common? They're both talking about the need for government. Granted, they're on opposite sides. They disagree, but they're both talking about that need for government. So that would be my umbrella term there. So here's my thesis. While there are some transcendental ideas that reflect Christian beliefs, transcendentalism mostly does not align with biblical principles about the depravity of man and the need for government. So let me break this down. The blue part, that is me acknowledging the other side. While there are some transcendental ideas that reflect Christian beliefs, okay, that's acknowledging the other side. I'm making it argumentative. In red, I'm giving you my stance very clearly. Transcendentalism mostly does not align with biblical principles. And then in black, I give you the specifics. I give you my umbrella terms. Okay, they don't align about the depravity of man and the need for government. Okay, that still covers all of my ideas, but I did so with shorter phrases. Okay, here's a sample intro. As a Christian, I read transcendentalist works the same way that a dog salivates for chocolate. It looks so good and tantalizing, but many of the ideas are poisonous to my faith. Notice that was my hook. I started with a metaphor. Transcendentalist ideas empower the individual and appreciate the beauty of nature, which sounds warm and fuzzy. Though transcendentalist ideas seem to make people feel good, That feeling may come at a high cost, dishonoring God. Notice I'm starting to transition and focus into my thesis, which is what I end with. While there are some transcendental ideas that reflect Christian principles, transcendentalism mostly does not align with biblical principles about the depravity of man and the need for government. Okay, so there's my sample intro. It includes a hook, a transition into my thesis, which is at the very end of my intro paragraph. And that's it. So good luck on writing your intro paragraph.